I want to talk to you guys about a recent Tucker Carlson podcast appearance on the Adam Carolla podcast on his YouTube channel that caused enough of a stir that it got featured on Russian state television to help their propaganda machine. How did that happen? Well, I'll try to explain. Now, first, I want to build a foundation here to show you the type of tone of the interview he was doing on the Adam Carolla podcast. With Tucker no longer on Fox, he spent a lot more of his time going on podcasts and alt media platforms and going to platforms that a normal mainstay for Fox probably wouldn't go on. Now that he has much more free time and he's not with Fox and he has his own program on Twitter, X, he has more time for appearances like this, and not to mention, he's not under Fox contract, so he probably has more flexibility when it comes to appearances as well. Even if there's still debate on whether he's violating his non-compete clause, which Fox says he is, Tucker says he isn't, by doing his Twitter show. Anyway, he's going on a lot of podcasts, and Tucker unfiltered for a long period of time. It's only a matter of time, not an if, but a when, until he said something completely wrong that is either a straight out lie or is just in complete fantasy land. And he said two things on this podcast which I think deserve our attention. The first thing that Tucker Carlson suggested on this podcast is that he is genuinely afraid that the deep state, now of course deep state's very vague, but the deep state, that the actors who are after him, quote unquote, are going to assassinate Donald Trump. Let's play the clip.
What do you think the future holds? Is it,
I don't know.
I mean, are they going to let Trump be president?
No, of course. I mean, look, if, they protested him, they called him names. He won anyway. They impeached him twice on ridiculous pretenses. I
just want to say quickly, stopping the aid shipments to Ukraine, which he tried to do in 2019, tried to hold them up in order to get information about his political opponent, Joe Biden, in order to get it out of the Ukrainians. They wanted to get more information about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden out of the Ukrainian government, and he was withholding congressionally approved aid to do that. That is unconstitutional. That is not a power he has. If the aid has already been approved by Congress by a veto-proof majority, there is nothing he can do to stop it. Congress, even though we don't treat it like that, it's how we should treat it, is supposed to have power over our foreign policy. It is not supposed to just be the realm of the chief executive, which I think 20 years of the authorization for the use of military force in Iraq and Afghanistan, which has allowed us to assassinate Soleimani, and we're hearing some people saying we can use it to intervene in Mexico. A lot of people have just kind of receded themselves into thinking that the chief executive controls the foreign policy and can do whatever they want with it. That's not the case. It was congressionally approved. He withheld it anyway for information about his political opponent. That happened. It isn't fake. I don't think it's a ridiculous pretense.
Fabricated a lot about what happened on January 6th in order to impeach him again. It didn't work. He came back, then they indicted him. It didn't work. He became more popular.
Well, I mean, they don't know. He can say it didn't work, but they indicted him. They're saying he became more popular. We don't know that. Amongst conservatives, support for Trump went up because of the indictment, but that doesn't mean it went up among independents, and it didn't mean it went up amongst Democrats. Just because you have more support in the base and now people in the base are coalescing around you doesn't necessarily mean that's a smart general election strategy. Having a mugshot of your candidate taken on the campaign trail because of crimes he committed, including the illegal accessing of voting machines, which he accused his opposition of doing, including violations of the Presidential Records Act, the improper storing of classified documents, openly showing that to just random reporters who didn't have classification, who didn't have the classification to see it, him knowing that he was doing it. We have it on audio, him deleting the videos of him trying to hide those documents. He deleted the security cam footage, which we're now hearing. I mean, you can try to say that this is a slam dunk, it's going to save him, it's going to help him, he's going to rally support around him. In Tucker circles, I'm sure that's the case. Within, independent circles or semi-center left circles, that isn't the case. I don't think it's the case. 64% of Americans say that they're not voting for Donald Trump in the next election. I don't know why a mugshot will make him more popular. I've seen Fox News playing hey, look at this mural that was done in the inner city of Trump's mugshot. Shows that he has a ton of support. Then you would go talk to the artist, and the artist is saying, yeah, I made it because it's funny. Man, he got arrested. MAGA stands for my ass got arrested. But as long as they can narrative hump, that's all that matters. He does not know that it increases support. Increases support amongst Republican base in the primary. Don't know that in the general yet. We haven't even seen all the evidence that's going to be presented on the campaign trail. He is getting way ahead of himself when he's saying this. Also, why is he so orange? Why is he? No, he's not orange in this footage. He's red. Must be the lighting.
Then they indicted him 3 more times, and every single time his popularity rose.
Amongst Republican base voters in the primary. That is not a good sample for the entire population.
So if you begin with criticism, then you go to protest, then you go to impeachment, now you go to indictment, and none of them work, what's next? I mean, graph it out, man. We're speeding toward assassination, obviously, and no one will say that, but I don't know how you can reach that conclusion. You know what I mean? They have decided, permanent Washington, both parties have decided that there's something about Trump that's so threatening to them, they just can't have him. I mean, they're putting him on trial in March of next year in the J6 case, which basically consists of trying to send him to prison for the rest of his life for complaining about the last election. That's literally what it is.
We have no clue if he's going to be facing life in prison in this case. We have no clue what type of, if he was found guilty, if there would be some, plea deal or what would be agreed to or what the prosecution is ultimately going to get if he is convicted. We don't know any of this. The idea that because people don't like Trump and have attacked him politically and that he's faced legal problems, this is evidence of an escalating situation that can only end with his death, is I think the ultimate evolution of the Trump prosecution complex. Trump goes out and he says something like, let's ban Muslims. I feel like it. You know what? We're going to ban all Muslims coming to the United States. And then the media flips out because it's a crazy statement. They go ham on him. But then them going ham on him for that statement just becomes evidence of him being a truth teller. Even though it could just be evidence that he said something really stupid and horribly unconstitutional. Donald Trump will go out and he'll lie about the election being stolen. He'll lie endlessly about a million different topics, whether it be in foreign policy, domestic politics, any number of things. He'll lie. And then when those lies are called out or he's pressed on those lies, the fact that the media is pressing against him will be just used as more evidence that he's revealing some secret truth and that they're out to get him. And it couldn't just be that Trump, on average, lies more than your average president. He's a speed liar. If there was a speed run for the most amount of lies you can get out in a 1 minute time period, Trump would have that when it comes to the politicians and it comes to politics. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Trump will go out and act like a fool, will go commit crimes openly in some instances. I mean, when we talk about how blatant some of these crimes are, like the illegal accessing of voting machines after he accused everyone else of doing that, the hiding the documents after the National Archives tried to retrieve them for a year, deleting the security cam footage so they couldn't see him hiding the documents, lying about the documents to the National Archives. I understand how a Republican could look at the amount of indictments against him and think, wow, there's all this stuff against him. The media is railing against him constantly, or the people in the media railing against him constantly. And then Trump just says, I'm being persecuted. If you don't look at any of the details, that narrative humping can be, man, I love that word today, could be accepted pretty easily. But once you start looking at the details, once you start looking at the specifics, that starts to fall apart. The only way Tucker's narrative here can last is if there's no one in the room to actually talk to him about the evidence in the case. The only way it could last is if there's nobody in the room that's actually going to hold his feet to the fire and be like, okay, let's go down the evidence. Let's go down the testimony from his inner circle. Let's go down the amount of people who flipped on him. Let's go down what we already know. That's why they never spend time doing it. They just say 4 indictments and look at all those impeachments. And look, some of the attacks on Trump, like the piss tapes and stuff like that, it amounted to nothing. But that doesn't mean that all the attacks on Trump or all of the legal trouble that he's in is just a nothing burger because 1 or 2 stories in an extremely politicized environment ended up being bogus. You can't make that conclusion. You just can't. Look at the evidence as a case-by-case basis. And if you do that, the conclusion you're going to have to come to when it comes to these cases and these indictments is that Donald Trump is guilty. And that conclusion is a lot easier to understand. It makes a lot more sense that Donald Trump has all these indictments because he committed all those crimes, or at least some of the crimes. That makes a lot more sense in my mind than the deep state has been fighting a secret war against Donald Trump for 6, 7, 8 years now, and they finally reached a point where they've put all their cards on the table and they're just going to have to kill him. If the deep state is that powerful and they're able to do it and they're able to get away with it with no evidence of this plot really being able to come out to the public, there's no documents or any voiceover, like some audio coming out. If we have no evidence of that, if no documents, no audio, I don't know why this would be the assumption, unless you just wanted to serve a narrative that Donald Trump is being victimized. The explanation of the reason why he's been indicted is because he committed the crimes makes a lot more sense, and we have the evidence for it. Anyway, this is the first thing he said, that Donald Trump's going to get assassinated. Pretty silly, pretty ridiculous, but it is the logical end conclusion of the Donald Trump persecution train. And you want to know what's the worst part about this? Is when Donald Trump isn't assassinated, and I mean, it is possible that some crazy gunman goes out there and does something, definitely with how politicized the country is. But a year or 2 from now, when Donald Trump isn't assassinated, most likely, and he dies of natural cause, something else, is Tucker Carlson ever going to roll this back? No, he's just going to pretend he never said it. Let's move on to the other point, though, which I think is even more interesting than that point, is Tucker Carlson saying, and this is a timed estimate, by the way. He timed this. He said that within the next year, the United States and Russia will be engaged in an active hot war. That doesn't mean America sends more aid to Ukraine. That doesn't mean Russia puts more troops in Ukraine. That means American troops and NATO troops fighting Russia in an active hot war. He says that's going to happen in the next year. He says he guarantees it.
To them. So once you start indicting your political opponents, you know that you have to win or else they're going to indict you if they win, right?
Right.
And so they can't lose. They will do anything to win. So how do they do that? They're not going to do COVID again. I know everyone on the right's afraid they're going to do COVID and mask mandate. They're not going to do that. They can't do that. If they've already been exposed, that won't work.
Can I also just say, it is really terrible that it seems that one side's open political position seems to just be that if you're president, you should not be arrested. That if you were president at one point, you should not be arrested because there's a possibility it might be partisan. That's so we just never hold presidents to account and we send the message that they can make any number of crimes and just get away with it? A president once got away with a crime, so all presidents should forever be able to get away with crimes? What a terrible system, in a system that's supposed to have checks and balances. The people are supposed to be able to hold their politicians to account, where the law is supposed to apply to everyone equally. Even if it doesn't, in principle, it should, and that's what we should aim for. But I think a lot of it isn't really that position anyway. For example, Vivek Ramaswamy has stated openly that he basically wants to see both Biden, Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden in prison for the rest of their life. So I think it's a position that is only held kind of, it's a convenient position, I feel like. I think if the turns were tabled, this is not the type of treatment that they would give Joe Biden.
There's going to be, no, what are they going to do? They're going to go to war with Russia is what they're going to do. There will be a hot war between the United States and Russia in the next year. And
really?
Yes, of course. They want it anyway. I don't think we'll win it, but that's a separate analysis. But I think it's a political matter. They need to declare war footing in order to assume war powers in order to win. I believe that. And I think the evidence suggests that's true. So if you're worried about our politics getting like even more vicious than it already is, and people being hurt in our politics, which is entirely possible, you should be worried about the prospect of an open war. We're already at war with Russia, of course. We're funding their enemies. So we're fighting Russia. But I mean, an open battle with Russia where we say we're at war with Russia. I think that could easily happen. I think we could Tonkin Gulf our way into it, where all of a sudden missiles land in Poland. The Russians did it. Our NATO ally has been attacked. We're going to war. I could see that happening very easily.
Okay, so he says in the next year, we're going to have a hot war with Russia. We're already at war with Russia because we're funding their ally. Okay, number one, funding an ally is not at war. Okay, it's when the coffins start coming home. That's war. American troops on the ground fighting. If that's what a war is, it's just giving somebody aid, then would we make the argument that Russia is...
Eddie Bombay got a tier 1 subscription. Asterisk Eddie Bombay asterisk got a asterisk tier 1 asterisk subscription.
Thank you. That if you were to make this argument, then you could say that Russia and America was already at war before. In Syria, they were at war here. There's conflicts that two people are on different sides of. That's not a war between the states, right? He explains that there's a difference later, but it's not a war between states. Anyway, but putting that aside, that's me cherry picking. He is making a hard prediction for a war within a year, and his evidence for it is that they want it, that they want a war with Russia. That is what our leadership wants. The same leadership that dragged its feet on sending Abrams due to escalation. The same leadership that dragged its feet on sending F-16 due to escalation. The same leadership that still hasn't sent ATACMS missiles, even though the British sent over the Storm Shadows. They still haven't sent it over due to fear of escalation of those American weapons being used in Russian territory, which they have to promise to the British and others when they get these types of weapons, when they do get Western weapons, that they won't use them in Russia proper due to fears of escalation. The United States has tried very hard to keep open channels of communication between them and Russia. Sometimes even though when Russia wasn't being communicative back and they were just kind of yelling down into the void. There is no indication that I have seen that suggests that Joe Biden genuinely wants to start World War III. There is no indication that I've seen that. And there's also, in my opinion, no indication that I've seen that the Russians, as in the Russian government, wants to start World War III with NATO, at least right now. If maybe in the future, but at least for now, they don't. Because I don't think they could win. If Russia is having trouble fighting Ukraine, how is Russia going to win? Because he's saying that we wouldn't win this war. Now, maybe he means it in like the whole world would blow up sense, but if he means it in a way that the Russians would win it, I mean, if the Russians can't deal with Ukraine, how are they going to deal with Ukraine, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, Sweden, I believe Norway, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Denmark, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Hungary. I mean, Bulgaria, Romania. I mean, how are they going to deal with Italy? How are they going to deal with all of these countries if they can't fight Ukraine? You know what I think this is coming from? Recently, Tucker Carlson had on somebody by the name of Douglas McGregor. He's somebody who has experience in the United States military, but if you guys don't know who Douglas McGregor is, all you need to know about him is he's somebody who makes a lot of predictions, none of which come true. He has predicted, I think, 4 or 5 times during this war that Ukraine would collapse within a week. We've covered this on the show before. He'll say that this battle that just happened expended all Ukraine had. Within a week, it would collapse. He said it multiple times. And each time it was wrong. It was wrong after Bakhmut. It was wrong after the start of the war. And it was wrong at multiple other points when he said collapse was imminent. And he was wrong again and again and again and again and again. But when Tucker had him on, he didn't ask him about his wrong predictions or held his feet to the fire about his wrong predictions. He didn't pressure him about if you're wrong every single time you make a prediction on this war, why should we believe you about your future predictions? He just took everything he said, hook, line, and sinker, because what he said was, Ukraine is dying. Russia is thriving. It is impossible to win. And because that was something that Tucker wanted to believe, and something that supports his already pre-existing notions, is what he already believed, what he went into this thinking. He just took it face value and ran with it, and now he's saying ridiculous fucking nonsense like this. The type of stuff that would get people laughed off of a Twitch political panel show, let alone some of the most prestigious news companies in the country, like Fox News, even if it doesn't deserve the prestige. This is what Tucker Carlson has reduced himself to. Throwing out crackpot predictions that you would used to get from somebody on the street corner, methed out, with a cardboard sign written, "The end is near." And that's what we're getting from who used to be the most popular political talk show host in the country. And that would be it for the story. Tucker Carlson predicts that World War III is imminent and that we're going to lose it to the Russians and the Russians alone. That's the first thing. And not only is the war imminent, but that Donald Trump's going to get assassinated. Pretty ridiculous, making conclusions and predictions that he knows he doesn't have the evidence to put out. But, you know, it narrative humps. It pushes the idea that Trump's being persecuted and that the Ukrainians suck and they can't win, and that America is just war hungry, and it wasn't the Russians who started this, even though they were the ones who did the invasion. It's actually the Americans who wanted this war all along. And so he put it out there. But that's not where the story ends. Because I know about this podcast because I stay attuned to Russian state TV. And this podcast was broadcasted on Russian state TV. They used Tucker Carlson's statements about the West wanting a war with Russia based on nothing, based on no evidence that he presented. He takes this segment, Solenyev and the other state media talking heads, they take it, they run with it, and they use it to push more propaganda. His words are being used verbatim to serve the interests of the Russian state. Let's play this clip. In Soviet times, our generation constantly lived with the feeling of an impending apocalypse. I remember our happy Soviet childhood when they would constantly say, the most important thing is that there is no war. There were pictures of a nuclear mushroom cloud and instructions on what to do in case of nuclear war. There were all these jokes on this topic. If there are flashing of light on both sides of you, the most important thing is to hold your machine gun away from your body so the melting metal doesn't ruin your government-issued boots. All of a sudden, these jokes stop being jokes. It's very sad. It's sad because we're on the verge of a global hot war, which is inevitable. It's unavoidable because it benefits everyone. Now, I don't want to get too deep into like Russian nationalist theory, but this aligns very much with this idea of a purification war, this idea that Russia has this special role in history. A lot of Russia's members of Russian Orthodox Church, high-ranking members, Kirill's groups, and hardcore Russian nationalists believe, and this is something that was originated like 100 years ago. This is not like even super old. This is like 150, like these are old ideas. And that's why a lot of these like Russian nationalist ideas, they aren't like new ideas that Putin's brought to the forefront. These are old ideas that they're digging out. The idea is that Russia has a special role in history, a special role in the Christian world. Some people will even include the idea that Moscow was the third Rome, and their role is to sweep the degeneracy of Europe away and to act as a counterbalance against the secularism and against the degeneracy. Modern nationalists might say things against like the global homo and stuff like that. They need to sweep it away in one grand struggle, a purification war to help Europe, to save Russia and to save the Russian idea, the Russian world, this civilization, this light in the darkness that Russia shall bring to not only the people of Belarus and Ukraine, but a lot of times when you look at it, the post-Soviet context and how they're talking about it then, it goes much further. Definitely when you talk about Putin's regime, it'll go into Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, the Russian speakers there, etc. And so what he's talking about now is a purification world, that it's inevitable that we engage in this great struggle against the West. It's inevitable. It's not inevitable. And it's the Russians that will choose if it happens or not from their actions. If they decide to bomb Poland, or they decide to invade Poland, then there will be a war. But the Russians could leave Ukraine tomorrow. And even if the Russians continue to fight in Ukraine, that doesn't necessarily need to extend into a war with NATO proper. It doesn't. Even though they should leave Ukraine, if they were to keep the war isolated in Ukraine, odds are there's not going to be a war with NATO proper. And I don't think they won a war with NATO proper because they couldn't win a war with NATO proper. The war of Ukraine and NATO against Russia since 2014 did away with the taboo. What's interesting about that framing, by the way, is NATO wasn't sending Ukraine shit in 2014. The most Obama ever sent Ukraine at that time period, I think it was like 2015, maybe 16, was counter battery radar. So they could see when Russia was bombing them and where they were bombing them from. We gave them no offensive weapons until 2019, the Trump presidency. And when we're talking offensive weapons, we're talking shoulder-mounted munitions. We're not talking tanks. We're not talking helicopters. We're not talking jets. It was the Russians that moved in soldiers. It was the Russians that moved in jets into occupied territory in Crimea. It was the Russians that moved in the heavy equipment in 2014. So I don't know what he means by NATO war. We didn't have no troops in there in 2014. On going to war with the nuclear nation because it would inevitably lead to nuclear war. When it became clear that you can pull the tiger's whiskers or the bear's paws, all of them have decided, okay, let's go. These are the end times. We should realize this. Look, America does not fear nuclear war. There will be a war for sure, either in Europe or in Asia. Americans say very honestly and pragmatically, this poses no threat to us. These people are ready to take the world to its grave, along with themselves. For that reason, Tucker Carlson's arguments sound like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're not going to do the COVID thing again. They're going to go to war with Russia. That's what they're going to do. There will be a hot war between the U.S. and Russia in the next year. Really? Of course. They want it anyway. They're just playing the Tucker Carlson clip. I'll let it play out.
США и Россия – два крупнейших ядерных арсенала в мире, готовы схлестнуться. Так что это безумие? Они, американские политики, просто сумасшедшие. Я вижу настоящую истерию. Они убедили себя в том, что наш глобальный враг – Россия. И я думаю, что они действительно это имеют в виду. Даже республиканцы это имеют в виду.
Fantastic Russian from Tucker there. Who says that? A dead man walking. He sincerely believes that the next step after the accusations and declaration of impeachment will be an assassination of Trump. But this man, who is currently the most popular English-speaking journalist, you know what's funny about this? You know, I think maybe part of the reason they want to highlight this is like, you know, there's a ton of rumors that the Russian government almost certainly assassinated Prigozhin. So now we need to say, actually, you know, the Americans are going to assassinate their political leaders. That's actually what the Americans do. Maybe it's partially that. But what's hilarious about the Prigozhin story is that Soleniev when the coup first happened, was like all in on like kill Prigozhin. And then after it was settled, it was like, well, you know, it was genius that, you know, the government made this deal. And then after Prigozhin was killed, he was like, could have been, you know, this has the UK written all over it. When earlier we had Putin directly threatening the people engaged in the mutiny during the mutiny. He was like calling for their death. And then all of a sudden it's like, I don't know who could have possibly had an interest for it. Who had an interest in killing Prigozhin. It's, I don't know, man. It feels like they're just playing coy with it. The most popular English-speaking journalist signed his own death warrant. Okay, so get this. So, according to Solovyev and Tucker, we're gonna have Trump get assassinated before he can become president. He's gonna get killed. Okay, so that's one prediction. Second prediction is that America and Russia will be at war in the next year. That's the second prediction. Third prediction is that also Tucker is going to get assassinated. Tucker is going to get assassinated by the deep state. A lot of hard predictions, none of which I think are going to come true. And the thing is, when none of these predictions come true, people are still going to eat up the dirt that Solovyev and Tucker puts out. When really, they're not that far off from being the same type of propagandist at this point. When you see that they both engage in serving the same narrative, serving the narrative concretely and absolutely. If it goes against the narrative, keep the information away. If it serves the narrative you want to be true, present the information. That's how these two work. Great example would be Tucker Carlson and Nova Kakhovka dam explosion in Ukraine. Once it happened, most of the world's eyes turned to Russia. Many people thought they were the likely candidate. We've had more evidence come out since then of photographs showing cars stuffed with explosives on important locations. There's been a lot of evidence presented since then from expert testimony, some of which even testified on Russian state TV, saying that this explosion, this destruction most likely came from inside the dam, which would be kind of hard for the Ukrainians to pull off. Tucker looks at the situation. What's his conclusion? It was probably the Ukrainians to make the Russians look bad. He had to leave out the evidence that could have indicated the Russians did it in order to push out this piece of information, which he couldn't confirm. But he did it because it served the narrative to do it. If he admitted that there's a decent chance that the Russians actually did it, then it wouldn't serve his narrative. Therefore, it's like it never happened. They will not forgive him for the fact that he strives to interview our president and post it on a platform that has no censorship. Covering up with this part, I can't rule out that in the near future, as he is leaving Europe, there will be an air crash, or something will happen to a car in which he travels, or he might eat something that he shouldn't. Maybe his heart will suddenly stop. If I were in his place, I'd tell no one my travel routes. Because the number of sudden deaths surrounding the Obamas has been off the charts for a long time. So this is just like the Hillary Clinton thing. The Obamas and Hillary are like if you go and look at the history of Hillary in like 30 or 40, 50 years of public service, there's people who she knew that died. And so people will take all the people she ever knew that died, put them together and say, wow, it seems like Hillary knows a lot of people that die. Isn't that suspicious? But if you do that through 50 years of public service, including in the presidency from over 30 years ago, we're talking about the Clinton presidency, yeah, you're going to find a lot of people. Because you're going to meet a lot of old public officials in 50 years of service, many of whom she's going to meet at the start of her career that are like 60, 70-year-old Dixiecrats. But whatever, it serves a narrative, so you pump it out. So here's wrap up. Here's what's going to happen. Tucker's going to get killed. Trump's going to get killed. And we're going to go World War III all in the next year. Wow, a lot of strong predictions from people with nothing valuable to say. Oh, also about the idea of Tucker interviewing Vladimir Putin. I could not think of a softer interview for Vladimir Putin than a Tucker interview. Tucker, even though if it's somebody just like some liberal or something, he's gonna do the interview in the most scummy way imaginable. If he likes you, he will do an interview that sucks the hairs off of your cock. And I mean that. If you look at any of his recent interviews with someone like Douglas McGregor or his stuff on Twitter, and he likes the person at all, no matter how poorly they perform in that interview, he is gonna suck the hairs off of their cock. And that's what it will be. Of a active, wanted war criminal, that's the type of interview he will give him if he interviews Vladimir Putin. And it's crazy because he would have a unique opportunity to hold him to the fire, hold his feet to a fire in an aggressive personal environment. Something that Putin would never do currently. Never allow himself to be in the sights of currently. But if he gets the opportunity to do it, that's not what he'll do. Did you see the Orban interview? I didn't, but it would be the exact same. Let me ask you a question. Did you watch this Orban interview, and did he suck the hairs off of his cock? I have a weird feeling he did, because the last documentary he did about Orban that I did see sucked the hairs off his cock. And it left out so much information about state control, or about political party control of the media landscape, and Orban's tight control over Hungarian media, and what is allowed to be on the TV and what isn't allowed to be on the TV. Something that I think a independent, now freelance journalist should care about. It was really prepped, Orban talking his narrative. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Tucker loves Orban because he's a shitbag. And Tucker's a shitbag. So it's that simple. Shitbags of the world unite.